Hello and welcome to this Sharp podcast. I'm Peter Howarth. I'm Global Clinical Scientific Lead at GSK, and interviewing with me today is Fabienne Jorn from the Swiss Severe Asthma Registry, and we're joined by Professor Ratko Djukanovic, who is co-chair of Sharp and founder of Sharp and Professor of Medicine at Southampton University. Ratko, perhaps you could start by just letting us know, what is Sharp?
That's a very good question. Sharp, in principle, it's a clinical research collaboration supported by the European Respiratory Society. But what is it? What is the heart and soul of Sharp? Well, it's a collective of 4 stakeholder groups with patients centrally involved in everything we do. But in addition to patients, we've got the clinicians who look after them. We've also got the scientists who investigate the mechanisms that underlie asthma. And we've got pharma partners, the big pharmaceutical companies that produce the drugs that we make available to our patients. I like to think of it as a big family where we all work together with one single objective, and that is to improve the lives of people with asthma.
So was that the driving force that led to the initiation of Sharp, the perceived unmet need as far as patients were concerned?
Indeed, very much so. I have to take you back a few years when we had a collaboration funded also by the European Union, which was called the European Asthma Research and Innovation Partnership, ERIP. That was really driven by Dr. Samantha Walker from the then Asthma UK charity in the United Kingdom. And we had a similar composition. There were patients, there were scientists, there were physicians, there were colleagues from pharma. The main objective of that program was to identify the unmet needs for people with asthma and for the research that we do. So when we were asked to join, I thought, well, what is it that I find is really missing? And having had the background and the huge benefits of collaborative efforts such as UBioPred, and also I have to praise my own institution, Southampton, which is a very collaborative place. I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to have as one of the outputs of ERIP, wouldn't it be nice to have as the output a network of research centers? And so we undertook a survey, and the interest and the support for such an idea was just enormous. And so that coincided, when we finished the ERIP discussions, that coincided with really a takeoff within the European Respiratory Society of this concept of clinical research collaborations. So we applied, and I was not at all surprised that they supported it wholeheartedly.
When you started with this original project, what were your hopes to achieve with Sharp, with this great network you have built with all the stakeholders? And what do you see as the main challenges you are facing?
Yeah, excellent questions, Fabienne. I came to it with a very open mind. I didn't think that I had it in me to determine what it is that was the biggest unmet need. What I knew was that I wanted patients to be right at the center of it all, and that they should tell us what their unmet need is. And that we, the others, those supporting them, those researching the mechanisms, those looking after them in the clinic, and pharma that produces the drugs, that we should listen. And you could argue that that could be a big challenge, but surprisingly, it wasn't a big challenge. Everybody signed up to it and found it really fascinating. And so we set out at our first foundation meeting we came with a blank sheet of paper. And we split ourselves into breakout groups and so on. And we made sure that the 4 stakeholders were represented in each of the breakout sessions. And we just talked. And that's when we identified the key unmet needs, because we obviously had to come out with something practical, something that we could all grab by the neck and push. And so it won't surprise either of you, because you are physicians looking after people with severe asthma, that the thing that was most important to all stakeholders, in particular patients, was exacerbations. They don't want to have these frightening exacerbations, and they don't want to have to take oral steroids. And so that was our key objective at the time. But the other thing that I want to say is that we're very open, we're very flexible because of the way we're structured. It's a very flat management structure that we've got within Sharp, where everybody can express their views, their concerns, their wishes. And so we're very agile in our ability to look at and to concentrate on what we think is most relevant.
That makes the uniqueness of Sharp that different stakeholders are involved and equally represented. I think that's one of the uniqueness I observed in this group. Or would you describe it differently?
Well, I think it might be a bit arrogant of me to say that we are unique. I couldn't go so far. I can only go by what other colleagues and the various directors of the CRC program within the ERS have said, that it is a good example of how things can be done better through collaboration. But we are always open to suggestions and critique and to improve the way that we interact between the 4 stakeholder groups. The key thing is to make sure that we do things that are good for our people with asthma, that makes a difference. And I think we're reasonably successful.
In Switzerland, it's quite rare that we have patients directly involved in the research. So this is also something we have to push a bit more country-wise, I think.
Yes, and you can see how it's done elsewhere. Peter, I'm sure you'll agree that in the beginning it took a bit of time for us to really embrace that principle that you have the patient sitting right next to you at the very inception of the program. When this whole notion of patient engagement was introduced, we would do all the thinking, and then we'd call the patient and say, "What do you think?" And sometimes it was more formality than anything else. But I think now, we introduce them very early on in the discussion so that it's much more efficient that way. You don't make an investment, an intellectual investment, and sometimes even financial investment, and you go so far, and then actually, when you ask the patients, what do you think? They say, well, actually, we don't think that's going to be possible. Mm-hmm. Even things like recruitment, you have to ask, is this doable? And again, countries can learn from one another. In some places, you've got a cultural sort of barrier. Patients themselves don't feel confident enough, but also, the doctors are resistant. They are used to being the gods in white coats and don't want to lose that egocentric value.
Certainly within the UK, if you're doing research now, you'd involve patients at an early stage in deciding whether, what you're aiming to look at was right and whether you're going about it in the right way. And as Ratko said, was achievable. And I suppose sharing practices across Europe is one of the way of influencing these things, isn't it?
So maybe just the next question, what is the future of Sharp and where do we go, or where do you wish it to go?
Of course, the future is important and we're very open-minded. Again, I'm not avoiding the question, but the future will have to be decided by the 4 stakeholders. And we do that, as I said, in a fairly agile way. We're constantly, certainly every year we get together and we discuss what is the current unmet need, how are we doing well enough, do we need to adapt in the way we organize, and so on. So the future is going to be shaped by everyone, and in particular by the patients. But if I may just give my personal views as to what I think is the future, I think it has to do what it does more efficiently. And my new co-chair, Professor Celeste Borsberg from Denmark, has a very ambitious plan to get us to think in a more organized way when it comes to doing our research, by developing protocols that then help us to focus more effectively. The other thing that we could do, and I think we're in a good position to do, is to enable more harmonious practice across Europe, so that we learn from one another, so that we raise the standards, we level up the standards of practice in severe asthma clinics. You have to appreciate that not every country across Europe, we have 29 country members, and there is an inequality in the level of care. I think everybody would be happy to recognize that. And so one big objective and one big ambition that I would have is for those centers where the standards of care, where the complexity of care is not as good as in some other places, that they should learn and adapt, and we have to help them to really step up as quickly and as effectively as possible. So I think these two ambitions I would put foremost in my mind.
Thank you, Ratko. When any new initiative starts, it finds its way, it faces challenges, it overcomes those, and gradually formulates the direction it's going. And I think if SHARP could raise the ambition for the care of patients with severe asthma throughout Europe, and as we look forward in a coordinated fashion with different stakeholders, that would be a great achievement. So I thank you today for listening to this podcast. Fabienne Jorn and myself have been talking with Professor Ratko Djukanovic, who is one of the co-founders and co-chair of SHARP, a stakeholder organization for the benefit of patients with severe asthma. Thank you.
If you'd like to hear more podcasts about the work being done by SHARP from the perspectives of different stakeholders, then visit the SHARP website at europeanlung.org/SHARP. You can also find additional information about SHARP project and research programs, as well as how to join the SHARP CRC by visiting the website.